Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Seekers of the Supernatural. I'm your moderator, Tony Spera, along with Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren. Tonight we're going to speak of a fascinating case that happened right here in Connecticut, the Brookfield demon murder case, which was also made into a book that we have here, and also made into a movie of the week called The Demon Murder Case. And what I'd like to do is start off, if I could, with you, Lorraine. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got involved in this case right from the start?
We were contacted by Father Dennis, who at that time was pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Brookfield, Tony. And the call came in, and he spoke about a young boy who he had been trying to help, but recognized it as a case of possession. He told me that he was very leery of becoming involved in this case because he had been assigned by the bishop to exorcise another home, but this was not of an individual now, of a home that had infestation going on that we investigated. But he said, I want you to know that you have my prayers. At that time, he was going to Ireland with his mom, and he was concerned, I think, that the devil would get back at him maybe through his mother. Now, he spoke of David and David's problems. He said that David had a slight learning disability, but there was very bizarre behavior occurring to this young 11-year-old boy. When he mentioned about the boy's problem with a learning disability, we had contacted a doctor in Trumbull, Dr. Giangrasso, and asked him if he would be willing to go to the home with us that night. It was a real hot night, Tony. And the reason we asked Dr. Giangrasso was because he too had a son with a similar problem. And we felt that if there were a type of medication maybe that David would be on that might have been causing it, that he would recognize that that was not the case. David's case was not severe enough to have any type of medication. David was in the very beginning stages of demonic possession. We went to the house this hot night. I can remember like the steam and the moisture coming off the ground. It was a weird night when we arrived there. First, Ed tripped going up the steps into the house. And Dr. Giangrasso made kind of a laughing comment. And he tripped and fell too. And when we got in the house, we were sitting there at the table talking. Now you would watch David, and he would be doodling, you know, drawing or something like that, and he'd be concentrating on what he was doing. And then he would look up, and it was no longer a little 11-year-old boy.
Now this 11-year-old boy would become extremely strong. I've seen nights when it would take 4 and 5 men to hold him down. He would be ranting and raving and yelling. There was times when he would attack his mother. Now this boy loved his mother. He loved his father. And at one time he actually broke the mother's nose, I believe. Arnie Johnson, who was a young man that was engaged to his sister, Debbie, would help every night to control the boy. He'd come home from work, he was a landscaper, worked very hard, and he'd have his supper, lay down, but then just around 11 o'clock was when this would occur to David. As Lorraine said, all of a sudden, you'd look at him, he was normal. The next second, it wasn't David anymore. And this would go on until the sun came up. The boy would roll around, he would go into fits. I seen one time when he actually levitated, had extreme strength, terrible obscenities would come from him. And Arnie Johnson, who was a young man, who I would call probably an all-American boy. He loved sports, he was into baseball, he had many awards for baseball. He loved fishing, and he and Debbie, his fiancée, who was David's sister, would go off fishing and they'd have a good time. But this kid, 18 years old at the time, would stay awake all night long and then go to work the next morning. But he made a fatal mistake. One night he said, and he screamed at these devils, "Take me on. Leave my little buddy alone." He got his wish.
He challenged the demonic.
He challenged the demonic. Now, by this time, Tony, into the case, the Catholic priests were already involved. Father Dennis had left for Ireland. Another young priest was assigned to the parish at that time, and another young man who had just recently been ordained was also assigned there. They came to visit us, and the two of them, finally, it grew to having 6 priests involved in it. 6 priests.
Three of them from the Vatican.
3 of them ordained and schooled in Rome, these men. And they were very frightened of the things that Arnie would say. He was such a compassionate young man, such a low-key person. Never once did I see him show any type of violent behavior. He was a perfect gentleman. Mr. and Mrs. Warren, everything. Just a beautiful person. Tremendous respect for the priest.
If you were going to have a son, he'd be the boy you'd want.
Yeah, that's the kind of a boy he was, Tony.
But he made that fatal mistake.
And
challenging the devils.
And I know that one of the Catholic priests even met with him to talk with him because he was so concerned about his welfare. And because, like you say, he challenged it, Tony. And remember that when you challenge the demonic, it doesn't act at that particular given time, Tony. It waits until you are the most vulnerable, and then it strikes.
When you least suspect it.
When you least suspect it.
Now what happened was actually, Arnie had gone to a pizza parlor with Debbie, his fiancée, and his sisters. They met Alan Bono there, a friend of theirs. They went back to the Bono's house, and Arnie disappeared for a few minutes. When he came back, he was somebody entirely different.
What? Now, when
he doesn't recognize or know anything about what happened from that point on.
Well, now, Tony, we're going to backtrack from time to time.
What I'd like to do, if I could interrupt for one moment. I know, Ed, that you and Lorraine both have brought slides tonight. Do you think perhaps we should look at perhaps the first few slides just to get an idea of what this was all about?
Yes, that's a good idea.
So if we could.